Does your child get frustrated easily when doing his schoolwork at home? Mine did, and I want you to comment because I don't want to feel like I'm alone. Or maybe you have the child who just avoids doing their work or sits in front of it for hours and does nothing. Again, that was me. Are you looking for ways to ignite that love of learning that your child once had? You're going to love today's topic. We're talking about overcoming resistance, reigniting that love of learning. My name is Diana Ralston from Spark Homeschool Parent. Each week, we bring you strategies to ignite the spark that engages your child's learning. SPARK is an acronym, S-P-A-R-K. This month, the month of October, we're highlighting strengths, the strengths of your child. Last week we touched on discovering your child's strengths and looking for those annoying habits that maybe create opportunities for you to step back and look at the clues that for us to discover our child's strengths and who is this child, and also providing opportunities for their learning. So if you didn't get a chance to take a look at that, look back on the stream and you can see last week's Facebook Live. I want to welcome you. I've heard from a few of you and it's awesome. Some of you are just starting out homeschooling and I really want to welcome you because you are really investing the time to do the best job that you can. It's not easy homeschooling our children, but you're looking to us who have gone through this journey before. So congratulations to you and welcome. And then some of you, I heard, are moms, typically moms, who I know from my journey of homeschooling, and you have younger children. So you're in here for the long haul and you're just looking for some ideas and tips just to reignite that spark. I want to welcome you also. And then there are those who are using this opportunity in these last 2 years to just bring your children home, educate them, maybe for temporarily, maybe you'll catch the bug and keep going. But whatever your homeschool environment looks like, I want to welcome you. And you're all welcome here for our discussions. Homeschooling is not easy. None of us will say that it is. And it's especially difficult when we have that child, one or more, that disrupt our household with bursts of frustration. Or maybe you have that child who used to seem really excited about learning, but these days you see them and they're just sitting and avoiding their work. What does resistance look like in your household? I'd love to hear from you. Whether you're watching this live stream or watching the recording, just put in the comments, what does resistance look like in your homeschool environment? And it can look different for all of us. We've all heard that people were created to learn, but that's really hard to believe when we see our children complaining and avoiding their work. Today we're going to be talking about natural reasons why maybe our children are resisting learning, doing what we are asking them to do in their schooling. We're also going to be discovering your children's strengths and how that can reignite that spark and the love of learning again. This conversation is for you. If you know that homeschooling at this stage is the best thing for your child and for you, but you are finding that they are disengaged, disruptive, they complain, or maybe they're just avoiding their work. I sent out a poll earlier this week on the Facebook group, Spark Homeschool Parent, and I heard from a few of you, and maybe you're like Julia, who has a few children, but she said yes, she has the disengagement, the disruptions, the complaining, and the child that avoids their work. Maybe that is like you, or maybe you just have that one child who exhibits all of those behaviors, my heart goes out for you. It's not an easy time. This conversation is also for you if you do want to ignite that love of learning that your child once had. If you're homeschooling, no doubt you know another family who is homeschooling also, and maybe this conversation would be helpful for them. When I was homeschooling, we never talked about the hard times. I actually didn't really understand that other people were experiencing the same sort of thing in their home. I felt really alone, and maybe that's you. Maybe that's your friends. Maybe it's not a topic that you've talked about, but I can almost guarantee that every homeschooler experiences this at some point. And it's not something we often talk about, so please share this Facebook Live, share the group with others as a form of encouragement. This is Spark Homeschool Parent, and I'm Diana Rolston. And today's conversation is overcoming resistance in the homeschool environment, reigniting the love of learning. There are lots of reasons for resistance. I will only talk about two, touch on a third. I am not here to diagnose. Every child is different. Every family is different. I don't have all the answers. I'm merely going to be sharing some ideas for you to think about. Some ideas from my experience of homeschooling my children, my experience as an educational therapist working with children who struggle in their academics, and my experience through education to be a teacher. I have 3 boys who graduated through to graduation in homeschooling. They're young adults now. But I want to tell you a story about my eldest. Gotta love those oldest children. He was the typical compliant, pleasant, generally well-behaved boy growing up. When he was in grade 3, however old that is, he did the grade 3 curriculum. When he finished that successfully, the next year he was on to the next grade 4 curriculum. And that went on, and he did well and continued. Until that time, I touched on it last week, around the 10 to 13 age, when things just seem to change. For some children it's younger, for some children it's older, but for him, he was 12, doing the grade 8 math curriculum. And I just saw his confidence going down. I saw him just not the same vibrant, happy child that he was. And it stemmed from that math curriculum. At the time he was doing the Saxon Algebra 1/2. I don't encourage or discourage any curriculum. I'm just merely saying this is the curriculum that he was using. At the time, the Saxon math worked really well for him, and I used different curriculum for my other 2. You just have to know your child. But for him, this suited him well up to this point. And so he was doing this Algebra 1/2, what was typically, I guess, mentioned for grade 8s. But he would sit he was doing his math in his room at the time. He would sit in his room, and then, I don't know, an hour would go by, and he'd still be sitting there with no math done. I used that opportunity to stand back, to observe, figure out what is going on. This is not typical for him. And engaged in conversation with him. And what we found out, that for him, he just wasn't ready for that algebra. What are X, Y's, and Z's? Sometimes our children just aren't cognitively mature for the material that we're for the curriculum that they're using. And that's not a good or a bad thing. what we did was I took that math away. He actually didn't do math for a year and a half. I would reintroduce it every once in a while just to test the waters, and then held back again and reintroduced it until 18 months later. Um, he picked up the grade 9 Saxon math and went right into that, and he was perfectly ready for it at that time. But I want to just say that you have to really know your children. I know my eldest, and I knew him at that time. He's very mathematically minded, logical thinking. So I knew he would always go back to math. It's just something, one of his loves. But he just wasn't cognitively mature for it at that time when he was 12. But through that time, also when he wasn't doing his math, he was doing many other studies. And those, together with just another year of development, made him sort of practiced and increased his cognitive thinking and problem solving. And then he was ready the next year for that. At the time, though, I was still judging. I was judging my son against what I thought all other 12-year-olds were doing. I didn't know. I didn't talk about these things with my friends. The curriculum is telling me that 12-year-olds do this, but my son wasn't. What was his weakness? What was wrong? And then I was judging myself. What was wrong with me as a parent? Why couldn't I teach this to my son? And maybe you're at that stage also. Just thinking, judging, comparing. I want to just encourage you to look at this differently. Every child is unique, and I will say that again and again. Every child is unique. Just stand back. That resistance that you're getting from your child, maybe he or she is just not ready for the material that they're working on. Take a look at that and spend a lot of time observing, getting to know your child and where they are, and engaging in conversations with them, because they're frustrated, clearly frustrated, whether they're showing it in outbursts of frustration or holding it in like my oldest did. So I encourage you just to stand back and get to know your child. Is this, and yeah, is this just that they're not ready? My second story also has to do with math. My middle son, who's he quite different from my oldest son, he was very vocal about his dislike, in complaining and yelling and ripping pages of math out of his book. I would find these around the house. These pencils now were broken out of frustration, not out of curiosity like I was talking about last week. Disrupting our whole family during the time of school and after, and it was a really difficult time. Something had to be done. So again, I stood back, trying to think, what is going on? I was really fortunate at this time. I met a co-op teacher who places public school children into co-ops in high school. And he was placing a lot of children in the automotive, in garages, repair shops. And we had this great conversation. And he said, a lot of these children being going into these co-ops, or thinking that that's the future that they want, the career that they want, they just don't realize how important math is. That they actually have to do really well in math to succeed, to strive and do really well in automotive. And this was something that really interested this son. So when he was frustrated and not interested in his math, I sat with him in one of those calm moments and I just shared with him, God has gifted you with this beautiful curiosity for mechanical things. Can you see how what you're doing in math can really help you when you're taking apart those engines and putting them back together? This worksheet that is, and lessons that are teaching you about ratios and percentages, how about we use that and calculate how much oil is going into that gas if we do it in 100 milliliters. Let's do that calculation again if we mix the gas and oil in 1 liter. And then, hey, this 25-liter jerry can. Let's do those calculations to get that to get that oil and gas mixture just perfect with these calculations that you're learning in math. Math now was relevant. It was exciting for him. I can do this. I can mix the gas. People have told him that it's not easy. I'll do it for you. But he was able to now apply what he's doing in math with what he's doing in real life. And it became exciting. He did have to realize that not everything on that in that math curriculum can be related to his interests at this time, but no doubt there will be something that he'll be learning that he can apply and can see. This is relevant. This is relevant to my life. I need to know this. Leonardo da Vinci has a great quote that I posted: "Study without desire spoils the memory, and it retains nothing that it takes in." Is that what's happening with your child or your children? That they just don't see the connection between what they're doing, what they're studying, what's frustrating them. Why do I have to do this? I'm never going to use this again. Like, I'm sure you've heard that. Let me know if you have, because I don't want to think that I'm the only person. That what they're learning in school needs to be relevant. They need to have a desire to learn it. I want to just have you think about something for a moment also. I want you to think about the goals that you have for your children. I've done a workshop. I'll do another workshop in the new year about setting goals, social, physical, spiritual, and academic goals. Give just some quick thought to that, and we'll get into it later in the next few months. Again, social, physical, spiritual, and academic goals. Is your goal, or one of your goals for your children, to make it to graduation, to finish the curriculum up to grade 12 and to get a diploma? Nothing wrong with that, but let's just think about that. If it is, that's going to be really hard motivation for your child to get through that work. As some children can do it, and that's fantastic. But then also remember, is it their desire? Are they going to remember this? Or are they just getting through it to get to the end? Or is your goal to prepare your child, to ignite that love of learning, to strengthen those God-given talents, desires, abilities, and to prepare them for their life? I would suspect that that's the goal of many of us that homeschool. And if that's the case, then start looking, for that connection between what they're learning and where they're going. And maybe start here. What are their strengths? And then find what they need to make that blossom, to set them on their path. I know that not all homeschoolers are Christians, and I appreciate that. I am, and I read my Bible, and whether you do or not, Proverbs 22:6 can be an inspirational quote, or it can be something that you um, think of a little bit more deeply. But Proverbs 22:6 says, "Start children off on the path they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it." This was my driving scripture for much of my homeschooling, setting them on that path. And if you think that that is part of your goal for your children, look for the desires, look for their strengths, and then what they need to just get going with those, and that will spark um, their desire to learn and lessen that resistance. Another thing that this is, so that's this third, or the second instance, situation that you may find in your household. I just want to touch on the third. As an educational therapist, I feel like I just have to say this, that sometimes when we experience resistance to learning, sometimes it is due to a disability or a weakness. Again, that's not judgment. That's not a judgment on your child, and that's not a judgment on your teaching. It's just all of us have strengths and weaknesses, things that we love and things that we don't. And sometimes it is a developmental disability that needs to be addressed. So that's something we may touch on next week, and definitely touch on in the weeks and months to come. But just keep that in the back of your mind as you're observing your children as they're learning. I think as moms and dads who really know their children, we do get a sense of what is going on. But I hope that you have just heard from this little time together that the importance of standing back and observing and really getting to know your child and engaging in those conversations with them. Ken Robinson is some of you maybe have heard him on TED Talks. He has some great TED Talks. He's a great speaker and has some wonderful ideas about education. And he says in his book, The Element, when you're in the element, your sense of time changes. If you're doing something that you love, an hour can feel like 5 minutes. And if you're doing something that you do not, 5 minutes can feel like an hour. Is that what's happening with your children? That's what was happening with my oldest as he sat in his bedroom for 5 minutes, and he just thought he was there forever with his math in front of him. If we help our children discover the desires that they have, the strengths that they have, the things that they want to do for hours and hours and hours, and time passes in 5 minutes, that's what we as homeschoolers, that's really how we are preparing our children for the path that they are to be on in life and to succeed in life. I hope this has been helpful for you. This is Spark Homeschool Parent, and our commitment is to equip you with the skills and the mindset to navigate this ever-changing homeschool journey. If you're looking for a community of encouragement, join us, if you haven't already, at Spark Homeschool Parent Facebook group. And also remember to like and subscribe. Next week, I'm so excited. I have a guest, Diane Geerling. Some of you may know her. If you haven't, you're going to love our conversation next week. Again, that's Friday at 1 p.m. on Facebook Live. We're going to be talking about be a student of your student, continuing this conversation of strengths and discovering the strengths in our children. And until next week, remember that as a homeschool parent, you can be the spark that ignites your child's learning. I'm Diana Rolston, and you can find me on Facebook at Diana Rolston, Spark Educational Therapy, and spark homeschool parent. Until next week.